Well, I give this movie fans of the Fallout video game series, you know what I'm doing. Hello, interwebs, and welcome to Close Up. I'm your co-host, Joe.
And I'm Ryan.
Oppenheimer and Barbie just released this weekend. Based on the title of this video, you know which one we saw. Although I do plan to see Barbie this weekend. Maybe you'll hear me talk about it.
And we chose wrong. No, I'm kidding.
Well, maybe you'll hear us talk about it on a future leisure list or something. But we're here to talk about Christopher Nolan's new film, Oppenheimer. So, zooming into our medium shot now. Have you ever heard of Oppenheimer, and what were your expectations going into this one?
Oh yeah, I've definitely heard of Oppenheimer. It was actually really funny. Before this film was even announced, I knew a little bit about Oppenheimer, and I think it was even because of Eternals. I was like, why has no one made, and of course this was wrong when I said it, why has no one made a movie about Oppenheimer? I mean, they've made movies back, I think in the 30s, and I think they made one in the 70s as well, called Fat Man and Little Boy, if I'm correct. But I really wanted to see like a biopic version, like a modern biopic version of Oppenheimer, because I think his life would be very interesting to tell. And then I think 3 months later, there was that still of Cillian Murphy, or that little teaser of Cillian Murphy, and then you see Oppenheimer behind him. I was so excited for it. And then every time I went to the movie theater over the past year or so, they had this stand-up clock, like it was a countdown to a nuke, but it was for the movie Oppenheimer.
Oh, wow.
So this is like my most anticipated movie of the year, and I was very hyped to see this movie.
I had limited exposure to Oppenheimer as a historic personality. To be honest, most of the stuff I knew about him came from Epic Rap Battles of History when they did him versus Thanos. Having seen the movie, that was a pretty informational video. Because I was like, oh, this is a reference to that line and that line. Oh, okay. Like, I actually knew quite a lot going in from that. The other thing I knew him for, even before that, was the famous interview he gave in the 1960s, I believe, where he just looks like his soul has left him, just the husk of a human being after what he created. And he gives this little speech, which I have some of the transcript of here. We knew the world would not be the same. A few people laughed. A few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him, takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another. And with that, let's get into our close-up and discuss this thing. This film is giving me an existential crisis. I've been thinking about it nonstop for the last 24 hours. It's very rare I walk out of a movie theater just shaken to my core about what I've seen and emotionally affected that strongly. I'm pretty hard to shake. Last time I felt this way was when I finally finished Chernobyl just a couple months ago. Well, not even a couple months, couple weeks. But anyway, when I finished Chernobyl, which is also about the fallout of nuclear devastation. So I guess it's just something about the power of nuclear technology that strikes a chord with me. It's just so awe-inspiring to me that the very building blocks of all life can be twisted to destroy all life when used wrong. But they can also be used for great things as well. I mean, nuclear power is pretty miraculous. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about the bomb, the weaponization of the atom. That's what this movie is about. And it's Fallout, pardon the,
Do you know when I knew this movie was going to be good?
From the opening credits.
When Christopher Nolan quotes Greek mythology. The Prometheus line about him being tortured for all eternity because he gave fire to man. I know about that story very well because I studied it in school. And when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be good. just whenever, you quote Greek myth to me, you have me hooked right away. But it's so true where, uh, like, you gave them the power to destroy everything. And like
Yes.
you could argue back in the day, Zeus had a point to make, but also Zeus is kind of a dick. Uh, he's famously a dick. There's a meme online where it's like Greek myth, and it's like a super long text, and that's like Greek myth if Zeus kept it in his pants, and it's like this short.
That's
so.
It's true. I believe this movie was based off a book called American Prometheus. Pretty much all the information was from that book. And from what I've read up since, pretty accurate to history, this movie. They tweaked a couple things here and there, but I agree with you right away. I was hooked by this idea of the American Prometheus, the guy who gave us more than we could handle and was punished eternally for it. Now, in the case of Oppenheimer, he wasn't punished as overtly in society, but I think he punished himself for the rest of his life. Which, like I said, you look at that interview, it's very famous, just how he looks like he hasn't slept a day in 20 years.
Yeah. Well, he very, very famously, and I think they told it, I was getting a little worried with the opening act, first chapter, when it was going on about his early life, because there was a lot of jumping around, but I think they just got all that stuff out of the way of Oppenheimer very famously had trouble sleeping throughout his entire life and regularly forgot to eat. That's why he's so thin. I read a rumor somewhere Cillian Murphy, like every day he only ate almonds or something to get that thin, which I don't believe, but
what I heard was, I think it was Emily Blunt and Matt Damon were talking about how Cillian Murphy never joined them for cast dinners because he was on such a slim diet. I think, like you said, he basically just had almonds and maybe a slice of apple or something. He was on bare bones diet, so he never came out to cast dinners with them. I believe they said they were because they were in a town all together, they basically all went to the same diner every night for dinner, except Cillian. Oh. They said it's not like most film shoots where somebody has a home nearby or everyone's just at a hotel and everyone's separated and eats alone. Like, no, they were all kind of in a community together for the duration of their filming, so the cast spent a lot of time together, which they have great chemistry in the movie, so I think that's pretty apparent. They spend time together, except with Cillian. So he was more...
Yeah. God, imagine being on that film set and being at that dinner. That'd be amazing. I'd give anything to be on that dinner. But yeah, I feel like I really loved Cillian Murphy's performance in this. I am a huge Cillian Murphy fan coming off of Peaky Blinders. I know you haven't seen it yet, and you will.
Yes.
You watch everything else, so I'll give you a pass. And it's so funny because there's a few scenes where I can see Thomas Shelby poking out, who is his character in Peaky Blinders. Not in terms of how he's talking or even the way he acts, but it's the way he smokes sometimes. You can kind of see him do the same pauses he does as Tommy Shelby, but that kind of just, I feel like, adds to it as well. That's just who Cillian Murphy is. But I loved his performance in this, kind of just like the quiet, to himself scientist, but who also is very assertive and very patient with a lot of people. And it made me felt like they might have accidentally done in this movie is made Oppenheimer kind of look like a dick, where instead there's a lot of scenes where another scientist will argue a point or try to be like, hey, why don't we go in this direction? And everybody else is kind of dismissing him, but Oppenheimer's like, no, let's hear him out. And I feel like that's a really awesome thing that they did to leave to the legacy of Oppenheimer.
Yes. My favorite thing about this movie is how much of a nuanced picture it paints of Oppenheimer the man. You could have easily gone in a very black and white direction of this guy is a hero for creating the bomb, or he's the greatest menace the world has ever known for creating this super weapon of mass destruction. But here we have a brilliant guy who genuinely wanted to make the world a better place, even though he felt he had to make some moral compromises to do that. Part of the film, I think, is that he was never really entirely sure one way or the other how he wanted his work to be used. It was kind of just, well, if they have the guts to use this thing, I'm reasonably confident people will see how stupid warfare is. So I think he kind of wanted them to use it at least once, just to see how bad it could be. But it was only after they used it that he realized they'd keep using it. And that's when he became more of an anti-nuclear activist, or he used his position to advocate for less nuclear armament. He hated the idea of an arms race with the Soviet Union. He definitely loathed the idea of the H-bomb with its increased destructive capability. He's like, okay, we're just making this thing a lot worse now, and I'm doing what I can to control it. So you have, once again, but the nuance also extends to his personal life as well, where, you know, he's a guy who has multiple affairs with his wife, on his wife, and he can be kind of a dick to people. He's a little bit distant and cold in many ways, but he's also like super into, like, he helps unionize the college, and when he's talking to Harry Truman, like, well, what should I do with Los Alamos? Give it back to the Indians. He's got, you know, he's very idealistic in
I love that
some
scene
ways.
so much.
Yeah.
Gary Oldman is a legend. And
was Gary Oldman? I literally...
It was Gary Oldman.
I literally didn't even notice.
President Truman. And I saw him, I was like, absolutely. Yes. Just more veteran actors. Just keep bringing them out. Bring all of Hollywood into this movie. And I think he did very great. Very great. I think he did great subtle acting as well as President Truman, without being too over the top in his one scene. But to go back to Oppenheimer and how his story's told, I think very much so at the beginning, everybody was on board with this because it was a race against the clock against Hitler and Germany, and the fact that, hey, we need to build this before they do, because if they do, everyone is screwed. Sadly, they didn't find out after the war that they were nowhere close to building an atom bomb, but they were already ahead into production. I think they said 2 years they were already into it, and Germany had surrendered. But they built this thing, and they spent $2 billion on it. They still won enemy in Japan. And I know in the movie they said they're going to surrender anytime, any day soon. But if you're kind of like a true historian, you know that Japan was very adamant on not surrendering until they absolutely had to. Yeah. So that's why it was sadly necessary to drop not one but two bombs to show that, hey, we've done this once, but we can also do it again.
But the controversy, I think, was that mainly that they dropped it on civilian targets.
Yes.
They did debate in the movie, maybe we could do it on a military target, and they're like, well, there's none big enough. But we still need to make a point.
That's one of my favorite scenes because the secretary is such an asshole in it. Where he says, we can't drop it on Tokyo because Kyoto. Me and the wife, and the wife honeymoon there, and it's a beautiful country. And there was this awkward laughter in my theater where it's just he did not just say that.
Well, the first thing he said was, well, we've crossed Kyoto off the list because of its cultural significance to the Japanese people. Also, my wife and I went for our honeymoon there. It's a great place. The cultural significance is one thing, but also his personal biases saved the city. It's like he literally could have killed everybody in that city just on a whim, but just because he and his wife honeymoon there.
The absolute gall of him to say that. It's just like, oh my God.
Funny thing about that line, actually, I heard that I've been doing a lot of reading on this movie the last couple days, but Christopher Nolan, basically, he encouraged all the cast members to learn about their real-life counterparts for the film. And the original script basically just said that thing about, we're going to not do it because of its cultural significance. But the actor found out that this character and his character's main guy and the wife, that they honeymoon there in Kyoto, and he's like, can I include that? And they're like, sure, it'll work.
That's hilarious.
They just thought it was. He just found that out in his research, and he's like, yeah, can I include this? This would be an interesting detail to add. Sure, why not?
Wow, I love that. Yeah, I think what really sells this movie is not the building of the bomb. I mean, it's a great part of the movie, and then the actual detonation itself, the effect is. I mean, we'll talk about it later. I don't want to blow by it, but I feel like the third act is what really makes this a phenomenal film.
Yes.
It's even though I feel like there's going to be some critics out there, very few, that'll say it's a drag, but it does show just how adamant and ruthless the American government was against people who did not have right-wing ideology at the time and were even associated with communism, or just people that they knew that were a part of communists. I mean, the fact that they made this fake document, or one person made this fake document and handed it off to someone who pissed off Oppenheimer to hand off to someone else who Oppenheimer pissed off. Excuse me. And then they were like, oh, we should give him a trial, but don't make it a real trial because that would give him a platform and he could actually win this. Let's put them in this shack of a room and have it be very private. And then I think they did this well, where Oppenheimer actually hired a very good lawyer, but he was just in this kangaroo court that they were just able to bend the laws so much in their favor. And to be fair, Oppenheimer got off fucking easy. He could have gone to jail. He could have, I mean, McCarthyism was hot at the time. And he did get off like somewhat easy, but he still got screwed over.
He did get rewarded later on when John F. Kennedy was one of the people who sympathized with him at the time, and then when he became president, he's the one who gave Oppenheimer some recognition.
Funny part.
Yeah.
It's like,
but
who voted against me? Oh, this young up-and-coming Senator John F. Kennedy.
Yeah. This is one of the few things I take issue with in the movie just a little bit, is that is the Senate hearing section, because for the longest time in the movie, and I know this is just Nolan being Nolan, playing with non-linear timelines, but I didn't understand what was going on for most of the movie. Now, you could argue, okay, he's not treating me like I'm stupid. I keep watching, I'll figure it out. And I did, because when the story finally caught up, it's like, oh, so this is what is going on. But you're cutting back here so much, and what's happening here is a question that I can only ask so many times over the course of 3 hours before I figure out what's going on. It would have been nice to know that this was a Senate hearing for Oppenheimer's security clearance a lot earlier. Now, it did tie in really well. It does all pay off eventually, but it's just a little bit grating.
It's confusing at first. Yeah,
it's confusing, and I didn't know, like, the black and white versus the color. I'm like, okay, so Oppenheimer, when he's being interviewed in that room, I got the impression that it wasn't too long before that Senate hearing, which was in black and white. So I'm like, okay, so is black and white the most modern? And if so, is this color thing a while back? But Oppenheimer looks older here. So what's actually happening? What's the order of events? I'm trying to piece it together for most of the movie. Which, once again, that's just Nolan's thing. You don't go into a Nolan movie expecting a linear story. So it's... Yeah, I can only say so much there, but it's just, as a viewer, it's kind of frustrating trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I sort of, by the end of the movie, not at the beginning, I just kind of assumed that the black and white stuff was through Louis Strauss, Robert Downey Jr.'s character's POV. For it, because at first I was like, okay, the black and the white is in the future, the color's in the past, but then we cut to a part where it's their whole dinner and it's them in the middle, like talking about how Russia has a bomb and we need to start doing hydrogen bombs, but it's still in black and white, so you're a little confused. But then I realized we follow Strauss's character into that scene, and then we kind of follow him out at the same time. So that's kind of the way I pictured it.
They also showed that scene again later in color.
Yes, they did.
I don't recall if it was from Oppenheimer's point of view that time, but that's a very interesting piece of color theory there.
I think it was, because there's that part where he's looking at the map and it looks like it's underwater.
Which you could argue is also Nolan trying to say that Oppenheimer could see more of the full scale of the world and all its nuances and colors, where Strauss is very narrow-minded, sees the world in black and white, which for his character makes sense. Robert Downey Jr. is incredible in this movie.
Oh my God, he's so good. I just watched a video he did about Vanity Fair. You know, when they do all those videos of actor looks upon their career and talks about it. And I skipped all his early stuff, even Iron Man, because I know he's talked about Iron Man for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I started the part where he talked about the judge, which I love that part. He even brought up a part where it was like, Warner Brothers knew me from Sherlock Holmes, and they told me, hey, we have this script. We don't know if it's going to do well, but go do it. And he said he had a blast about it, and he loved taking that risk. And then he made a joke like, but we don't do that anymore. And then they cut to the Oppenheimer part, where he talked about how, when he was talking to Chris Nolan about it, he said, this character has so many subtleties and flaws that are so underneath, and I want you to play that, and he's not quippy. Don't take all that stuff that you've learned over your years and just get rid of it. I don't want you to do that. And he said that was a challenge for him, but he welcomed it. Yes. And he said he had a very open and honest relationship with Chris Nolan, and that it was a blast to do. And I soaked up every minute of Robert Downey Jr. on the screen, because I did not want his last big screen thing to be Dr. Dolittle. I'm glad, and not to say that he's retiring, but I'm just glad that I was able to see him in this. The way he's able to play this sort of, that's how he described it. He said he was charming, but only charming when he's being sleazy. He's not a popular guy, but his true self only comes out when he's a bit of a schemer. And he said that was the challenging part, because Robert Downey Jr. is a very charming guy, but he had to play it as he wasn't until he was scheming and being manipulative with others. And to watch him sort of be behind the scenes and play all this subtlety is really good. I could see him getting nominated for supporting actor.
You'd better. Yeah, Strauss, the funny thing about him is that you could argue he had a point. A lot of it, he was the one mostly responsible for pointing out Oppenheimer's inconsistencies of character, which, from our perspective, is just a three-dimensional person not really knowing what they want to do, not really having made up their minds about their morality, their moral stance on these issues. But to him, he just sees Oppenheimer as this wishy-washy guy, this egotist who turned the whole scientific community against them, was totally for the bomb when it was his idea, goes against the bomb when it's the other, I forget his name, Teller's idea to build the H-bomb.
Yes.
It's like, you're for it when you're in charge, but now that you're on the outs, now you're trying to screw over the entire American nuclear program. Or make us tone down, or there's a spy in Los Alamos and you didn't know about it. Your security clearance was pretty bad, which we do see in the movie. They weren't the best with security, but it was also a necessary evil to get things done. They couldn't do it the way the military wanted to do it, because it was time is of the essence here, and we can't compartmentalize too much. Otherwise, no one's going to know what, the right hand's not going to know what the left hand's doing. So there were a lot of reasons for it. But I did like how Strauss could communicate why Oppenheimer could be seen as not that great in hindsight.
Yeah, and his little speech to young Han Solo near the end, where
that's who that was. Too. I knew his face from somewhere. What
he did good too. What's his name?
Oh my crap!
I have the list of cast here. He better not be far down the list. But yeah, his little speech at the end about why he did what he did is not because, it is, you can clearly tell he's trying to hide that it's out of pure jealousy, but he has reasons, he has motives. It's he knew all the security risk. He knew Alden Ehrenreich. He knew what Oppenheimer was doing at the time was wrong. See, it's tough to judge what Strauss did now when we have all the information, right?
Yes.
It's years after the Cold War. Nothing fucking happened. But back then, it's a few years after World War II. Germany is gone, the Nazis are gone. Who is the next possible, quote unquote, evil to combat the United States? It is Russia. And hey, they're probably going to build bombs, so we need to build bombs as well.
They
And
did
the
build a
guy
bomb. They're
who's
doing
saying,
nuclear
and they did,
tests.
exactly. And the guy who created the atom bomb is saying, no, we shouldn't create hydrogen bombs because they're going to create hydrogen bombs, which to him, which Strauss is thinking, hey, I know you know a bunch of communists. So the fact that you're trying to make us look weaker and have Russia have more bombs than us makes me a little suspicious. Even though I know for a fact you're not a communist, I can somehow twist the... So in his way, he was trying to do what was best for his country. And even Robert Downey Jr. said this. He said, like, even now, I'm still flip-flopping if he was right or wrong on the side of history. And I think Christopher Nolan beautifully explained that in this movie, where there wasn't a right or wrong person in this movie. There was just, we needed to make a bomb. We made a bomb. And a lot of people regret making it. And a lot of people are very happy that they made it.
Yes. I thought one of the coolest scenes with his communism affiliations is when they're interrogating him in that closed room hearing. And they ask him if he's still friends with Chevalier, his communist friend. He's like, yes, even though his lawyer is like, don't say it. Don't say it. Even
when he didn't want to lie or something, yeah.
Even when he's being grilled, he still values truth and honesty enough that he'll still admit he associates with communists. Because for Oppenheimer, see, this is why I think this movie is still very applicable to today, even though this story happened 70 years ago. Is because today, just like in this era, in that era of McCarthyism, the Red Scare, our world is very preoccupied with binaries, black and white. You are or you aren't. You're a communist or you're not. You're a racist or a homophobe or you're not. You're a Democrat or you're a Republican, right wing, left wing. You're whatever. You're either this or you're not. But Oppenheimer was like, and also if you have multifaceted opinions on things, people don't understand that. It's like you're either for this or you're against this. Why can't you be a little bit more nuanced with your opinion or change your mind? We don't allow for that in politics nowadays because we call those people wishy-washy, or we say they're not good decision makers or leaders because they change their minds. They can't commit to an ideal and stick with it.
Neutrality in the terms of politics is never a good thing. Morally, it's a good thing. And I think everybody could learn from neutrality. I've myself identified as a neutral political person, but
it's not even neutral. It's just nuance. It's just the fact that it's just the fact that you can't change your mind at all. And Oppenheimer was devoted to honesty, even at the cost of his own career, because he wasn't willing to denounce communism, or at least his associations with communists. Because he's like, you know what? Communism, as I see it, is pretty dogmatic, and I don't like the communists any more than I like the guys who are persecuting me right now. That's not to say I didn't have communist sympathies, because I liked a lot of what they were doing, and they were my friends. I didn't like it enough to join the party, though. And it's like that. Those are that's the kind of nuance that the people who persecuted him didn't understand.
That one scene where Oppenheimer is at his friend's house, and I don't know if it's when he brought the baby over, but it's when he is talking about something on the project, and one of his communist friends says something on the likes of
Chevalier.
The Chevalier incident. He says something of the means of, if we had got like this information over to some of my friends over in Russia, they'd be able to help out quite a bit. And the camera just stays on Cillian Murphy's back almost the whole time. And it's a brilliant directing moment and a brilliant acting moment where you see Cillian Murphy's like head pop up, just like, did I just hear that? And he slowly turns his head over, and it's just completely silent of these two actors just staring at each other like, I know what you're saying, but like, I'm good right now. And they're talking in code because they're friends, but they can't outright say what they want to say because they'll both put people in danger. That to me was the most tense I felt during the movie, besides when the bomb got dropped. I was like, oh my fucking God. I just...
Come to think of it, I was talking about how he values honesty before, but he does lie a couple times in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it's usually for...
He's got his own values, for sure.
Yeah. He did lie about Chevalier to protect him, even though he's like, well, you know, in hindsight, I knew I should have reported him right away. But you see in that scene that he knew what he was getting at, but he chose to defend him anyway. He also lied to Casey Affleck's character about it as well. He wouldn't tell the Groves about him either. He's like, oh, maybe it was somebody else. There were a couple people involved. So he was willing to lie first. He also lied to his wife until, well, more by omission. That still counts, though. But, until a certain point when he didn't. Then he was honest with her.
Well, I think he told her about Jean before the trial, but he'd never told her about the other affair. That's the other thing. Because he says something like, you knew about her. Like, you knew, like, it happened. He's like, yes, but I didn't think you'd bring it up in court or something like that. That's what I took from it. But it could be the other way around.
I believe she said, yeah, well, we've talked about this before. And she said, well, yeah, but now you just told it to history. So that was her problem with it.
That's
is
what
now
she's pissed about.
He aired their dirty laundry all for history to see on official record.
It's very much sort of, it's really funny how I kind of compare Oppenheimer to Alexander Hamilton a little bit, where he has his own weird twist and morals of he just wants to do what's best for his country. And Alexander Hamilton, very famously, he had an affair as well. And he had some political rivals who were trying to, I mean, this is all in the play. I don't know how much of this is real. I have the biography with me, but I haven't got to that part yet, where they were going to expose him for this because he was paying off the husband from his own money, of course, but they would have spun it to say, oh, he's using American money from it. And then very famously, Alexander Hamilton wrote the Reynolds pamphlet, basically saying, I had an affair with this woman. Politically, I am just, and nothing is wrong with me. At home, my morals are corrupt. And he basically outed himself and saying, yes, I had an affair. And very famously, his wife, Elizabeth, did not speak to the press for like years because the whole, like they say in the song, like the whole world knows how you, like, the whole world knows what you've done now. You didn't have to do this, but you like publicized it. And in his eyes, he said, nobody's going to out me but me. It's weird like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also liked in that scene with Groves, now that you're talking about it, is they talked about how they nearly didn't want to hire him in the first place was because he had the communist affiliations and he was a womanizer and kind of a troublemaker, like when he tried to help unionize the college. And there's that scene.
Tried to poison his teacher.
Tried to poison his teacher. And this is all on his records. And then Groves was looking at the record and they asked him, would you clear Oppenheimer based on the standards of today? And he's flipping through the things. And he's like, based on the standards of today, no. But I also wouldn't have cleared any of them. So
that's a great scene as well. And great acting on Matt Damon's part because he takes so much time until he answers to read through it. Like he knows the rules and all that, but he takes his time to be like, okay, how do I answer this truthfully, but not also fuck over my friend who helped us win the war in a certain way. And I love the way he delivers it as well. It's like based on the terms and conditions of something that was written after the war, or he says something like that. No, I would not have hired him, but I wouldn't have hired any of them.
Well, that's another thing that speaks to today as well, is that when you're looking through things with a modern lens and our modern morality and our modern systems of government and checks and balances and law, it's very easy to look back on anything even a couple years ago, decades ago, and say, oh, they got it completely wrong. What the hell were they doing? Why were these people acting this way or dealing with these people? Or like we judge their morality from our high horse. like people a couple decades from now won't do the same with us. Everything looks better in hindsight, or worse, as it may be in this case. At the time, his communist affiliations weren't a problem. And now that communism was out of favor in the 50s, well, then suddenly his communist friends were a problem. Nobody cared about that as much in the 40s when he was working on it. They're like, well, we're a little suspicious of this. We don't really know what it is yet. But the Red Scare wasn't a thing. Communism was just something the FBI had kind of on its watch list. But it wasn't
I mean, this is more in a sense to what happened in real life, but I hate that they use that against him in court. Jason Clarke, the prosecutor, who does an amazing job, being one of those shitty lawyers. I mean, he's a great lawyer, but on the wrong side. Yeah. And just basically saying, so you've known these communists all your life, and it just being like, communist, you're a communist. And it just goes to, and it's actually written beautifully and done well in this movie that just shows how blind people are when they use the morals of modern day when trying to judge something over 10 years ago or even longer. Yeah. It's just like, well, it wasn't a problem back then. So, like, how can you judge me on it now? It's like when people try to cancel 50% of Hollywood comedians and stand-up comedians. It's like, those jokes were acceptable.
If they're still making material like that today, fine. But they made the material 20, 30 years ago when nobody cared.
Exactly.
So what do you... Like, judge the people for who they are today, not what they did, unless what they did was actually heinous and, or they actually hurt people in a meaningful way.
Exactly. Just, if there was no actual harm done, then...
Yeah. We got to take things with some nuance. Some things in the past are actively harmful, and we should be vigilant about them. Other things are, we're making mountains out of molehills, which is most things I hear about personally. But
unless you're an ant, then a molehill is pretty big.
Yeah.
I read a comment like that, and a part of me was like, huh. I was like, well, he's not wrong. Like, everybody in the replying to his comment were like, shut up, shut up, shut up. And there was one person where he's like, well, he's not wrong.
True.
If you think about it.
Let's see, I had another comment about his Senate hearing. I also thought
Strauss
it was good when...
Or Oppenheimer's.
I also thought it was great when Emily Blunt got interviewed by the guy, because the scene just before that, I really liked.
I was waiting for it. Like, I was waiting for her to have like a great scene. It's like, because she's a phenomenal actress.
It's like, you're gonna put your alcoholic wife that you've cheated on so many times on the stand. Like, she's gonna screw you over, and he's like, don't be a child. We've been through fire and hell together, and you don't know our relationship, so don't pretend like you do just based on...
She's a very strong female character in this.
Yeah.
I love it, yeah.
I think one of my favorite... Well, I love the moment when she's turning it back on Jason Clarke, I think you said it was. And he's interrogating her about her communist affiliation card that she had so long ago, and she's like, well, I had it so long ago, I don't even remember. You're trying to make me admit to something I don't even know.
But it was a communist card. It might have been. I got rid of it 7 years ago. But it was from, and it just kept saying like communist, and a part of it was like, you fucking lawyer. Like, he plays it so well. It was like, you son of a bitch.
It's entrapment.
It is entrapment, yeah. But it's not like a real court session, so the other lawyer couldn't be like objection or what. I mean, he's tried to object before, and the line of one of the chairmen saying, it's already in front of us, so why don't we just read it into the record? I was like, oh, you fucker. I was like, that is entrapment. That is bullshit. Oh my God. Fucking American politics in the 50s, man. Jesus. Except for John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, Kennedy had his problems too.
He might have had his problems.
Yeah.
Marilyn Monroe. Sorry.
Well, for one. But yeah, the other line I really loved of hers that I've been thinking about a lot is when Gene Tatlock died and he's crying in the woods and she goes to find him and she's like, what the hell happened? And he's basically like, oh yeah, my mistress died. And she basically gets him to smarten up, and she's like, don't commit the sin and then make us feel sorry for you. Like, you don't get to do that, which I think is a great metaphor for the entire movie. Just like, don't commit the sin and then expect us to feel sorry for you, which he doesn't. Oppenheimer for the rest of his life, he never said he regretted it, but you could tell that he did have a lot of regrets. He didn't ask for sympathy because he knew what he did. So he always kind of rode that line. He never asked for public pity. Although, as she does say later in the movie, he did take those blows to his reputation on purpose because he kind of wanted to be punished publicly for what he did. Or at least that's why he didn't mind Strauss attacking him, and that's why he never really fought back, because I think on a certain level he felt he deserved it.
Yeah.
That he would get off mostly scot-free, enough that he could go on living his life. He wouldn't get arrested or anything, but also so the
he
record
couldn't be
was
part of the government.
Yeah, but also so the record was a bit more balanced. He took the blows on purpose, and that's why his wife was like, "Well, why aren't you fighting back?" And he's like, "Well."
I really liked Emily Blunt in this as well. I was just waiting for, because she was great in the few like dialogue scenes he had, but then there was parts where she was really showing her alcoholism, and then parts where she was subtly showing her alcoholism, and then that scene where she defends Oppenheimer. I think it's great because it shows how much anxiety she has, and then she just kind of snaps into it. So good. And I know some people were like, why do they make her, like, who do you get to play the alcoholic wife? Maybe the girl who played the girl on the train, who was a famously alcoholic ex-wife. It's like a famous book, but also it's a movie Emily Blunt did in 2015. But yeah, I thought she did amazing. And then for all the 4 scenes she was in, I thought Florence Pugh did really well. Because
Florence Pugh was a standout as well.
Yeah, she was a standout, and I think it's the chemistry between her and Cillian Murphy. It's not the fact that they have this amazing dialogue and these amazing scenes together, but they just represent that one like love you have in your life, or that one flame that you just can't let go of and you just care about. I mean, there's even jokes where it's like, I told you not to bring me flowers, and then she like expects flowers anyway but throws them out.
Every
and it's
time.
like, I told you not is like, it's like, I told you not to, this got a chuckle in my theater, but it's like, I don't want to see you ever again, but you always call me. And like, that got a chuckle. And I think that got a chuckle from like some couples as well.
Well, don't answer. I'll always answer.
Yeah, I'll always answer. So it's like, yeah, it's just, they can't get rid of each other until Oppenheimer's too deep into the building the atom bomb. He says, I have to let you go.
But you said you'll always answer.
It's like, oh. And then she, I believe, commits suicide. I felt like watching that scene where he was trying to explain it. It's weird because it's a Christopher Nolan movie, so the dialogue is turned down and the music's turned up. So a part of me was like, he either believes she killed herself or she was murdered by someone of like the Communist Party, because you don't see a person, but you see someone's arm and a black glove holding her head down in the water.
Oh,
like,
I missed that.
Real quick.
Real
quick. Yeah. And because he also brings up the part where there was a note, but she didn't sign it. So it's kind of...
He said there was a note. I think the story was she overdosed on some kind of drug and then drowned herself. And then she signed a note, which would be believable because she was clearly a very depressed person with not many tethers to happiness or a life worth living, except Oppenheimer, even though she pushed him away at every opportunity.
Yeah.
So when he finally left, that was it for her. But so yeah,
I thought she did great.
Yeah, but it's an interesting theory about she was murdered by the Communist Party.
I mean, that's my theory about it. I don't know.
It was, or it's more likely the American government trying to tie up loose ends, keep their asset on focus.
Yeah, I don't know how much of it is actually implied, but that's what my take was coming out of it.
That reminds me of another great joke that got a chuckle at my theater, was when the one scientist just like, I quit. Like, well, what's going to happen? Oh, we're just going to have to kill him.
Yeah. It's like, and he's like, joking. But it's like, oh God. Yeah, I thought Matt Damon did very well. I feel like he's very underappreciated because I feel like he was just in so much in the 90s and 2000s. He's a very good actor.
He's so good.
Look up parts in, I mean, Jason Bourne, he's great in that as well. But The Martian, he's really good in. I haven't seen it, but I've heard he's really good in Interstellar. And, oh gosh, what's that other movie that was on my brain? The remake of True Grit. He's got like a small role in that, but I feel like he does a decent job in that as well.
I don't remember that.
He plays the I think his name's LaBouffe. He plays like the sheriff that goes along with Haley Steinfeld and Jeff Bridges' character. He's not that. He's not like he's a side character, but he's pretty good. I think he got nominated as well.
I've been hearing a story about Matt Damon in this movie. He's saying how lately he's been in couples counseling with his wife, and the agreement he made with her was, okay, I'm going to take a step back from acting for a little while, unless Nolan calls.
Yeah.
Which he did, and that's why he did this movie.
Makes sense. I mean, that's weird to say because he just reunited with Ben Affleck. So I feel like that's a lie.
Well, I mean, he filmed those a couple of years ago, probably.
Oh, probably, yeah.
But
I mean, true, he's been a lot. I mean, yeah, and I guess his...
So based on this story, he'll be taking a step back.
I actually don't know what his wife does, but it doesn't matter.
Me neither. That's probably better. He's not.
I just hope it's not. I just hope it's better than a Tom Brady situation.
Yeah,
Tom Brady famously, like, he retired and then he was going to unretire, and then his wife divorced him because he promised he would retire, but like, she doesn't do anything and she hated being alone with the kids all the time. But like, I wouldn't complain if my husband made $100 million a year. But hey, that's just me.
Well, I think she's a model, isn't she?
I don't care. It doesn't matter. Whatever. They're divorced now. I bet they're both happy. So
the point is, he made promises and he didn't keep them. He promised
he's the greatest football player ever. I don't care. I'm not getting into it.
Exactly. He had his fame. Be a family man.
Get over it.
Anyway. Let's see, what else? Is there anything to do with...
I hope, definitely, I know for a fact, Christopher Nolan, I can name everything that's going to get nominated in this movie. Best directing, best picture, obviously. Best actor, best
supporting actor,
visual effects, sound design. Those are the 6 that I know are guarantees. Maybe music.
Music's great. Good time to talk about audio balancing was off again. I don't know what it is with Nolan, and you alluded to this a little earlier, but I don't understand why he does mixes this way. Because I don't know about, I didn't see it in IMAX, I saw it in AVX, which is just a step down.
Oh, God.
But, what? It's not like I saw it in regular.
No, it's just like, you get all the sound, but less of the, like, it's so overpowering.
I'm just saying, I saw it in that, and even then I had to strain for the dialogue. So, and this movie's all dialogue, which doesn't help. So I feel like there's a lot I missed. I definitely need to see it again. It's, Nolan, could you please stop? I mean,
I don't think it was as aggressive. Yeah.
Tenet was especially bad. But it's still, it needs, it's frustrating as a viewer.
I still think the sound design though is very good. I know the mixing part is not great.
Mixing is bad. Sound design is fantastic.
Ludwig Göransson, who did the music for both Tenet but also the Black Panther movies and some of the Creed movies, did the score for this movie, and I think it's phenomenal. So
yes,
I just want to say, I also think he did The Mandalorian as well.
Yes, I was going to say, and I think he did Joker too. No, or was that? I don't. Maybe not.
That might be someone else. He did Joker. We're the Millers.
Nope. Okay, I got that wrong. Yeah.
Oh, he's won an Oscar. Ludwig. Good for him. What do you win it for? Come on, IMDb, load. Is my internet about to go out? Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no, here we go. He won for Black Panther, the first one.
Speaking of internet going out, last night at my theater, we had a storm in the area last night, and
oh no,
my theater power went out in the middle of Oppenheimer. Yep.
No.
Yep, about halfway through the movie, things shut down for about half an hour. But the annoying thing was they got them enough power to come back up that they played the audio for like 15, 20 minutes. So we were just sitting in a lit theater listening to the audio, and I was just kind of listening to it, scribbling some notes in my notepad for this review or my online review in my blog. But so yeah, this is like 15, 20 minutes before they got the movie back on. And then they tried to rewind it and they had it in the perfect spot. And we're like, stop. But then they kept going like 2 scenes back. And then they just played it
so
there.
They did rewind it for you.
They did, but we had to watch.
That's the difference between your town and Yellen Dundas when I had to do Across the Spider-Verse.
But we had to
be fair, with that theater, it's Toronto, so like...
Yeah, they had more schedules to keep. We had to rewatch 2.5 scenes again. So it already turned a 3-hour movie into a 3.5-hour movie, which may bias my review about the pacing a little bit because I'm like, I had to watch like half an hour of this movie again.
What scenes do you remember?
It was one of the scenes when he met Einstein. It was the scene when he met Einstein.
Like early on?
No, it was when he brought
gave him the paper?
When he gave him the paper, and then he was talking to Groves about something, and then they were recruiting guys for the project in Los Alamos.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the scenes I really enjoyed was when he got his one friend. He was in military uniform, and he was talking about, okay, this is how we're gonna divide out the different sections of this. And his friend was like, well, first ditch the uniform. Like you're a scientist, be a scientist. But I also love the line that his friend said. I have the quote here. He said something like, Oppenheimer asked him why he didn't want to join the project with him, and his friend said, I don't wish the culmination of 3 centuries of physics to be a weapon of mass destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Which, good enough reason not to do it, I think.
Also the fact I didn't know before this movie that there was a very, very, very small chance, near zero, that they could have lit the atmosphere on fire.
That was one of the most mind-blowing things in this entire movie. And it wasn't even just the idea that, the atomic bomb could destroy the world. We've grown up in the aftermath of the atomic age.
We knew that.
We know that. I didn't know they could have destroyed the whole world off the first test.
Mm-hmm.
The first time they used the bomb just in the Nevada desert could have destroyed the whole world. Because it could have created a chain reaction whereby, I believe it's you smash the atoms and then the nuclei bounce off those into other atoms, which launches those nuclei off, and it's a...
And the chain reaction just never stops.
Yeah, until it engulfs the entire atmosphere. Near zero chance of that. It may not happen.
That scared the shit out of me. I don't know what it is. It's always been that way as a kid, but world-ending disasters, just like that could have happened, just like shakes me to my core. Even like it's a joke now, but it's on the memes like when you were 10 years old and someone told you the sun's gonna blow up in 10 billion years. You're like, no. Just the most existential crisis.
One of my favorite parts about that one though is just before the bomb goes off.
Then they say, don't worry, the Earth's gonna be dead long before that. And you're like, no.
I just love the scene just before the bomb goes off when his friend comes up to him and he's like, yeah, I'll bet you $10 that it does blow up the atmosphere. And then I think Rose was like, what's that about? Oh, just gallows humor.
Yeah. He's like, and then he's like kind of brushes off. He's like, the chances are near zero. Near zero? It's like, well, that's the best we could do. He's like, I would like it to be zero. Nothing's ever concrete with theoretical physics.
That's another big theme of the movie is that theory only takes you so far until you have to put things into practical use to actually see how they go.
Yeah.
Because he's a theoretical... That's one of the first things when he gets to his university and he meets the one guy who's doing machine work in the shop. He's like, well, I deal in theoretical quantum mechanics, but your guys actually build the machines and do the work. We need to combine the theoretical with the practical. So he needed to become more of a pragmatist. Even at Los Alamos, he had to work with guys who had more mechanical knowledge than he did.
Yeah. This movie, in lesser hands, could have been terrible, where Oppenheimer would have gone to those guys and be like, hey, we need to work together. And some other writer or director would have been like, you're just theoretical. We don't need you. But it shows like the real world of like scientists and synergy, but just also adulthood where it's like, hey, we should work together. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Like there's literally no reason for us to not work together because we're all scientists.
Exactly. Scientists, at the end of the day, I believe, want science to come to fruition. They love testing their theory. Like, theorists love theorizing, but they also love seeing their theories proven or disproven. They want to know one way or the other. And engineers love building things. And if they can test things, great. We learn something new, and we can use that something new to learn to further the next thing. And that's how science works. That's how it keeps giving us new cool things over and over. And you only get that through teamwork, through collaboration of theorists and engineers. And you're right. It's good that they showed there was a healthy relationship between the two sides.
I mean, even with Teller, the guy who he butt heads with the most, he still was on the project, some of it for most of the time, because he was really smart and they needed him.
And he's like, look, if you stay, I'll talk to you about your H-bomb thing once a week. Just us two.
Yeah. Have they made H-bombs? I think they have, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
Yeah, they did do that. I thought it was interesting how Oppenheimer wasn't... I always assumed he was more into the science side of this project, but really this movie shows that he was the director of it. He was the one guy who understood enough about quantum mechanics in the US that he could bring everybody together and understand all sides of it. But he was also a great speaker and coordinator. That was his main job. He was the director, not the one inventor of the atom bomb.
Well, that's what I didn't realize until this movie was he was the guy to bring over quantum mechanics to America.
Yes.
Like, he was the guy to bring it over and teach it. Not the fact that America didn't want to learn it, but he was just so fascinated about it, and they were learning it over in Europe that it was that he was the guy who just transferred it over. And that was a part of me that was like, that's a really cool bit of history that I did not know.
And it started off with one student who became many. He started an entire field.
I love that part where he's like, oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong room. He's like, no, you're in the right one. He's just like, okay.
He started an entire field of science on this continent.
Yeah.
Which is pretty incredible. Although I read he never won a Nobel Prize because his problem was that he was so interested in multiple areas of science that he never devoted himself to one enough to get a Nobel Prize in anything. Yeah. He was just kind of a jack of all trades in everything, which, it worked out well for him though. Or badly.
I mean, he's got a couple President's medals, so. I mean, the whole thing about like the Nobel Prize, it comes with like $1 million, so that's like the one thing.
Can we talk about the Nobel Prize for a second though? Because I thought that was a brilliant piece of historical, I don't know if it's foreshadowing, but it was a fantastic allusion to what Oppenheimer's story would be if you didn't know about it. Because they didn't really get into it too much in the movie, but it's one of those if you know things, where he's talking to his friend, and his friend was like, yeah, maybe I'm going to get an award for this. Oh, and Oppenheimer says, oh, maybe I'll get a Nobel Prize. And then be like, Nobel Prize for making a bomb? Like, that's kind of weird. And he's like, Howard Nobel invented dynamite.
Yeah.
Which, thing about that, which Oppenheimer seemed to forget about at the time in that scene, or the movie just didn't tell you, he made the Nobel Prize because he was so guilty about the destructive capability of what his invention caused that he donated his fortune into the Nobel Prize just to try to make up for any semblance of the chaos he wrought with that invention. So he was kind of the early Oppenheimer in that regard. He created this thing that killed so many people or hurt so many. And yeah, it's just kind of funny Oppenheimer brought him up, because as soon as they talked about Nobel, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah. I know everybody probably going into this probably like, oh, this is a movie clearly about the creation of the atomic bomb and it ending the World War. But I personally believe it is the theme of this movie is just about morality.
Yeah.
And what side of the morality are you on? Yes, they had to make a bomb. Yes, it was to beat the Nazis, but they dropped it on Japan
Civilians.
instead. Bunch of civilians because there was no military target there, but they wanted to see how much maximum damage they could do to those civilians. I think the number is like over 200,000 or something like that, just under maybe.
Between Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yeah.
And, Oppenheimer afterwards saying that that was morally unjust, or basically saying that was wrong to do. And the American government just sticking to their guns, being like, and I bet a few of them probably did morally think it was wrong, but they can't say that they were wrong. They're the American government in the 50s.
Now, the way they were thinking at the time was, we're going to kill 100,000 to save potential millions. How many of our boys or more Japanese have to die in this war before they surrender? Because neither side wants to surrender. But we have a super weapon that, with one large loss of life, we can prevent potentially more or years more of this conflict dragging on. So once again, this is a hindsight thing. We don't know how long it would have been for the Japanese to surrender without the bomb, because I think they would have. I think America was winning that war.
They were winning, yeah. And also, but it was, the USSR, they were very close to also invading Japan, or invading Tokyo at the same time.
Yes, but it's just, how long is this war going to drag on? Let's just end it ASAP. We're all going to regret this probably, but that's the thing about being in the military. You got to make hard tactical decisions sometimes. And even Oppenheimer, as we discussed earlier, a part of him, I think, wanted that bomb to go off because it showed people what a nuclear bomb could do. And that's the whole thing, right? And I don't remember if it was the movie that said it or if it's just something I read later, or I think it was Nolan talking about J. Robert Oppenheimer. Nolan believes that Oppenheimer is the most important man to have ever lived in history because of what he did with this bomb. Because Oppenheimer, his legacy hasn't been written yet, is the crazy thing, which I believe was Nolan was talking about. Oppenheimer's legacy, he's either the guy who created the weapon so bad that they only used it twice and then never used it again because he did what he wanted. He made people realize that weapons of mass destruction create untold chaos. They're not worth it. People can arms race all they want, but never use them because we all know it's mutually assured destruction. And we haven't used them again in 80 years, even though the whole last century was basically revolved around stocking these things up, threatening to use them. We're still getting new nuclear powers, threatening to use them, testing, but nobody's used it again since then. So that could be Oppenheimer's legacy. He's the guy who pushed us so far in warfare that we never went back. And it's all about how close can we get to peace after that? Or he's the guy who destroyed all life on the planet. And either way, we don't know yet because it's still too early. And that's why Nolan believes Oppenheimer is the most important man in the history of the world. He either made forever peace or killed everything.
God, this movie's so good. I mean, it just makes you look through the eyes of where we were back in the 40s and the 50s, but just also give you this great aspect of, did we do the right thing and what's going to happen in the future? And I think the ending line of him saying, when we said we could have started a chain reaction that destroyed the world, and Einstein says, yes, I remember that very well. And he says, I believe we did. And then it ends there. I was like, you fucking brilliant director, you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. Oh, I forgot. Kenneth Branagh's in this. I was like, it's a Christopher Nolan movie. Kenneth Branagh has to be in it.
Branagh's really good in it. See, the thing about Oppenheimer to me, which I was thinking about the other day, I am, as longtime listeners probably know, I'm a massive fan of science fiction. And one of the go-to stories of science fiction over the last couple hundred years, the first science fiction book is generally considered Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is probably the first story to do this also, is...
I guess it is sci-fi.
it's generally considered the first sci-fi novel. But
no, yeah, I thought about it where it was like, yeah, I guess it is.
yeah, but my point is one of the crux of sci-fi things is the mad scientist who creates something which extends beyond his control and creates chaos which he could never have foretold. That's a staple story of the genre. I've seen it done so often over my life. But this is worse because it's real. Oppenheimer was the mad scientist who gave humanity the power to destroy itself. Mm-hmm. He opened Pandora's box, and
it's like that.
And then let it out of his hands. The moment the military got it, he lost control of his creation and couldn't decide what to do with it anymore. And then, as much as he tried to put it back in the box, he spent the rest of his life trying, but he couldn't. And that's the tragedy of it. And to me, that's also why Oppenheimer is the quintessential mad scientist story. To me, it was his creation that, if you really think about it, every apocalypse story in science fiction, most of the best ones, trace themselves back to Oppenheimer. In the last 100 years, basically all of humanity's story about how we're going to end ourselves traces itself back to the nuclear bomb. Mm-hmm. And even the second biggest thing about how we end ourselves is usually artificial intelligence, which, how do we do that? Oh, we give them control of nuclear bombs. So even in those ones, it comes back to Oppenheimer. The next biggest threat we can think of maybe is biological warfare. I don't know. But I'm just in science fiction for the last 80 years, the most scary thing we can think of for how we're going to end ourselves basically always goes back to nuclear power, or the bomb specifically, or someone who has the power to unleash that bomb. So he basically created our doomsday stories for the last 80 years.
It's like, to go back on that mad scientist thing, just the quote Jurassic Park is like, you were too busy to think about rather you could instead of think about rather you should.
Yes. I think about that.
Stuff like that, yeah.
Often.
Funny thing you bring up the AI thing. I think James Cameron recently quoted something saying, because when he made Terminator back in 1984 and just how people are afraid of AI taking over everything, I think he said something like, I fucking warned you. Like, I told you years ago. You didn't listen.
And I believe Nolan also said that this film is a parallel to artificial intelligence too. Mm-hmm. I recall he had an interview where he said something along the lines of, this film is a warning to Silicon Valley about their algorithms and artificial intelligence. And he says, don't just pretend the algorithm is this thing that exists independently of you. People control this thing. Take some responsibility for it. Whatever chaos it brings politically or in like practically in people's lives, that's your fault. Just because it's kind of operating on its own, or artificial intelligence can maybe gain sentience, the people who built it need to take responsibility for the havoc that ensues. And that's part of the point. Oppenheimer, he created a weapon of mass destruction, but he never denied his part in it. He was always pretty open about, I did this, and I regret this. But today's people creating the next big problems of the future, they're too afraid to take responsibility. They just say, this is a thing, I own it, but it's not my fault.
God, we're all gonna die soon. Anyway. Yeah, I just think this movie is it's epic, and not in terms of spectacle. I mean, there's a lot of spectacle in it, but it's just epic in its beauty. And I think it's just an amazing amount of a culmination of both directing, acting, the music, how it's shot, and where most directors would have ended the movie probably around the initial test blast. And I think we get that extra hour of Act 3 and the effects of it afterwards. I think that's much better. I don't want that to happen to every movie, but no. I think the fact that it happened to Oppenheimer, and it's a great point in not just American history, but in world history about what happened to him afterwards. I think it's really important for everybody to understand that and what happened.
The movie did start dipping for me at that point after the bomb and the third act starts. I did feel a dip there. Where I'm like,
Oh, for sure.
We're still going. Oh, this is going to be.
I mean, it's a 3-hour movie.
You're
You're gonna feel a dip. Yeah.
But then it got me back into it. By the end, I was fully on board. But there was a point there where I'm like, oh, okay. And once again,
Didn't have
that's
to go to the
partially
bathroom
because-
once. I was
Me
pretty
neither.
happy about that.
But I also had this thing about not drinking at the movies just because of that.
Oh,
Like,
yes, you do that. Yep.
Yeah. But, yeah. So what else was I going to say here?
I mean, we should probably talk about the blast.
Yeah, that's a good.
Didn't talk about it at all.
That's a good place to go.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the blast.
First of all, Josh Peck is there somehow. He's just casted there. That's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. Just to see like
he was in a couple scenes.
an actor who we grew up on in Drake and Josh, obviously, just kind of like a childhood actor of our generation, and just to see him in probably one of the biggest films of our generation, that's pretty cool to see. And just a part of me was like, that's awesome.
I think he also stars on How I Met Your Father.
Yes, he's on that as well.
I'm glad he's been doing stuff.
Yeah,
Anyway,
he's done quite a bit for himself.
he was always talented.
Yeah, he's good. He's good in this.
Yeah.
I love how the tension of like, if anything goes wrong, don't push that button or something. Like you see a spike because there's that near zero chance. You're like, holy fuck, this could end the world. Even though I know it's not because I'm watching the movie that's about real life.
Yeah, that Trinity test, very intense stuff. And this is one of the best jump scares I've ever seen. The bomb goes off. It's just the light. We hang on to it, watch the explosion for a very long time. Oppenheimer looks upon his creation, and you can tell immediately he's like, well, shit. Oh boy. I unleashed, like I said, I opened Pandora's box with this one. Although he puts it.
Death, the destroyer of worlds.
Yeah. Boom.
Well, it's great, and some people might be confused about that, but it's just known as like the phenomenon of rolling thunder, where the speed of light is so much faster than the speed of sound. Not to say that the speed of sound is slow, but it's just what happens. You'll see something in the distance. Yeah, you'll see something in the distance go off, just like this is a great example of it, where the bomb will go off, and then a few seconds later, the shockwave and the sound will come off. I mean, it's also just like if you think about fireworks, you'll see it blow up. You'll see it go off, and then like maybe a few seconds later, you'll hear the sound of it going off. It's really strange, but it's also that happens in a lot of movies as well. With I just showed Joe a clip of this, but in Fury, there's a sniper shot where the man gets hit in the head, and then you hear the sniper shot ring out. It's a weird phenomenon, but it's just physics, and I love seeing that in film. It wasn't really popular for most of Hollywood because I don't think they really, not that they didn't care, but it just wasn't a priority for them. But it's become more and more popular with like die-hard directors to be like, no, we're going to do this rolling thunder effect. And it just adds this gravitas to this.
Yeah. It adds gravitas, and it's also people appreciate realism. But in this specific case, I love the moment of silence before the boom.
The theater
protracted.
was so quiet.
Yes, dead silent.
So quiet. It's not that there was no sound from the explosion, but there was just no sound from the people in the movie as well. Yeah. Just like, even the reaction is just like, oh my God. And Jack Wade's character was like, no, the windshield will protect me. And everybody now is like, no, like you need more than just that, buddy. But I thought that was just like a funny moment. It also reminded me of the explosion. If anybody remembers the movie.
What was the line? It's like, yeah, the windshield will protect me from the
windshield
blast.
Is UV
like,
rays, yeah.
And then the guy is like, what's going to protect you from the windshield?
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised the windshield didn't explode, because I heard that like 10 or 20 miles over in the town near where it was blown up in New Mexico, that windows were shattered.
Right.
From just the blast, and people were like, what the fuck's going on? And they couldn't tell them, obviously.
Well, it's military, so it's probably bulletproof glass.
But not that town, but just like a regular ass town.
Yeah.
So it's just, but you're right about his windshield where, it's probably bulletproof glass. But that explosion reminded me, does anybody remember the movie Dinosaur from 2000? It's a Disney movie, and it's basically just about what happened to the dinosaurs when the meteor hit. And there's this great shot, a great scene of the meteor hitting Earth, and then it makes contact with the Earth. You don't hear anything at first, but you see it hit. It's this super bright light, and then you see it actually lands in the water, and then it slowly comes towards the POV of the dinosaur. It's a Disney movie. Everybody's an animal. And then you hear like the initial shockwave. It's a great like dramatic scene or a tense scene for like a children's movie. It was that movie too that gave Disney the confidence to start doing full CG like animal characters. Like without dinosaur, we wouldn't have gotten live action Lion King, which, some people would not have liked. But technically speaking and visually, it's a great piece of art. It's a terrible movie, but visually it's good.
It does ring some bells, I think.
I'll show you after.
Yeah. So you were talking about
Can't
sound
show
design.
it here because of, copyright claims.
Yeah. You were talking about sound design earlier, and I thought great detail was in the lead up of the bomb, you hear a Geiger counter picking up in intensity more and more and more just before the test runs, which was my favorite sound design detail. Also the moments when he's imagining total nuclear apocalypse and he's losing touch with reality, the background's warping and shuddering around him multiple times, and he sees the drops on the map, the shock waves. Great stuff there. I thought those were some of the most impactful moments of the movie, was when he was picturing Armageddon in his own mind. Specifically the scene when everyone's hailing him as a hero, as the father of the bomb, and he's got to give that speech about like, yeah, we won, and you can tell he's just dying inside, even though he's pumping up the entire crowd.
My favorite. That's one of my favorite scenes because I think it's just so well edited and acted as well, but just shows it's a great representation of what anxiety is.
Yes.
Just like you just lose all focus. You feel like the earth is shaking. You can't really understand what's going on.
Yeah, because the way I took it was the couple scenes before, he's like, it's like we've said multiple times, he kind of wanted the bomb to go off just because he wanted people to see what it could do. But then he heard about the casualty count, and he was kind of waiting in anxiety. First of all, it was like, are they actually going to do it? And then he heard they did it. It was like, they actually did this twice. And then he heard the casualty count.
Yeah, because they never told him if they were actually going to do it or not.
And then he heard the video describing what life was like for the people who had the bomb dropped on them and what the survivors had to endure in the aftermath. And then by the time he's got to give that speech, we won World War II, yay me, yay, everyone at Los Alamos who researched this thing, we won the war. And then he starts picturing the slaughtered in the aftermath of his bomb, and that's the moment he broke in the movie, when it finally all came crashing down. Like, what did I do? You
see like the skin coming off of one of the actors' faces. You're like, oh God. And you don't really see it because it's such blinding light, but you're just like, Jesus Christ. I think another highlight of this movie for me personally is I'm glad we didn't see any like on the ground like war footage. I'm glad it was mostly just people behind the scenes. Not to say it would have taken away from the movie, but I'm just glad most of all the focus was just on the building of the bomb, because I think we've seen so much of it that like, what more can they add?
Well, I bet you more movies, if they were feeling gratuitous, probably would have cut to Hiroshima or Nagasaki and shown the bomb being used. Which, okay, first, Nolan probably didn't do that because he didn't want to look gratuitous or disrespectful, like he's showing these real-life mass killings as entertainment. But also, most of this movie has been reported that he didn't have any CGI shots in them. Everything in this movie is practical visual effects, maybe barring some odd CGI touch-ups, but everything you see in frame was done practically, which would have been hard to do Hiroshima and Nagasaki practically when he already did the Trinity test once. You saw the test. There was the tension of, is it going to destroy the world? which I mean, we knew it didn't, but it was still tense because they didn't know. But we already got the bomb going off once, practically. We didn't need it again multiple times.
And everybody, it's such a famous event. Everybody knows what the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, it's so bad that there were still imprints of people's, like, it looks like shadows of people still staining the concrete floor. And that's not because they were burned into it. It was because their bodies blocked that concrete's initial blast so that the, like, atomic bombs, like, explosion couldn't bleach the concrete. That's, like, the scientific way of saying it. And that's really disturbing when I learned that fact just, like, a couple days ago. Yeah, it's basically a shadow. And it's still there. You can go visit and you just see, like, it's almost, and I think they describe it as, like, their souls are, like, forever burned into Japan or something. It's just, like, heavy stuff. It's like visiting Dunkirk or the beach of Normandy. Just, like,
or like
you
Auschwitz
just feel,
or something.
Yeah, you just feel the impact of it. Just horrible shit that happened. And that was all happening around World War II. Jesus. One of the worst times in recent history.
It was a dark time, for sure.
It was a terrible time.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But, yeah, it's just the horror of everything that he created starts going back to... And I also love the scene when he's talking with Harry Truman again, when afterwards... when he's on his way out, or he's talking to Harry Truman, he's like, I feel like I have blood on my hands. And Truman's like, well, I'm the one who ordered the bombs dropped, so it's not about you.
He gave him a tissue. That's so funny.
He gave him a tissue, but then as he walked out, don't let that crybaby back in you.
Yeah, he very famously, I'm surprised not surprised, but, I mean, it's biopics, right? So they're never fully true to life.
I heard that's true, though.
That's very true. He very famously kicked him out and never wanted to talk to him again. I'm very shocked about how accurate this movie is in terms of everything.
Yes.
Like, even the affairs, even the small stuff as well. Like, all of Oppenheimer's friends. I'm just the amount of just dedication to tell this story as truthful as possible is really good.
Yes. I just wanted to skip back a second and talk about how brilliant the visual effects work in this movie is, because when I've talked about this before, even recently, where real filmmaking makes a big difference in the way I'm watching the film. We talked about it specifically in the context of action, in that when I'm watching someone like Tom Cruise perform real stunts, it hits a lot differently than knowing this actor was filmed against a backdrop of a green screen. This isn't real. What I'm watching has no tangibility. This is very much like that. When I see that nuclear blast go off, when I see the atoms, or I don't even know what the other stuff is, but when I see those kind of things swirling around in Oppenheimer's mind, and I know they filmed something practically to do that, just seeing what's in his mind, if it was computer generated, they could make it look great. I have no doubt they could make it look great, but the fact that they filmed something real, even for those scenes they didn't need to, it made it feel tangible in a way that put you in his mind. You're seeing the possibilities, and I'm nearly there with you. It's like I can reach out and grab it because I can. It is a real thing you're showing me. So
the fact that this was shot on film too, I think adds a lot to it.
I love how biopics are usually considered more of a low budget kind of thing. Like, oh yeah, they're not, like, it's real life, so we're not going to go that hard. But Nolan's like, no, biopic has a full-on practical nuclear explosion, film the whole thing on 70 millimeter IMAX. I think he said the final film strip was 11 miles long.
Yeah. I mean, there's a famous promotional video where he's standing beside the entire 70 minutes, and it's just this hulking. It looks like a dinner table, like a gigantic one, just this round table of 7 millimeter film. It's ridiculous. I did not see it in 7 millimeter, 70 millimeter, because I don't know. There is a theater here in Toronto, but I didn't grab one because they were probably all gone in 10 minutes. But I did see it in IMAX, and just, man, just it's and it was. I will give a little bit nitpicky. There is sometimes in the same scene, the aspect ratio would change from IMAX to just widescreen in between shots. And I don't, to me, that's really distracting. It will go from, it happened a lot with whenever they were outside and it was just Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt just talking on the ranch. It would just be like they would walk up to the scene, it'd be an IMAX, and then when it's just them, it's like a widescreen shot. It's really weird. I don't like it when directors do that, but you're not going to see that on another viewing. So I'm just being more picky. And maybe because they need to get this shot done quickly and shooting on IMAX is really hard. It's loud too. So
I also think it's partially down to what he's trying to convey per shot, because to my understanding, widescreen is more of a landscape thing and IMAX is more of a height thing. So between these shots, I want this shot to look more landscape. I want to get more height on this shot. I think it's also down to that thing as well. Like I'd like to assume it's an intentional choice, at least in part.
It was definitely intentional, but not like as distracting as say in a Transformer movie, where in that one it's like every single other shot it's like widescreen, not widescreen, widescreen, not widescreen. Yeah. It happens sometimes in this movie, but it's not as egregious.
Yes.
Whereas in the bigger scenes, they are just mostly IMAX the whole time, but they're just sometimes they go back and forth and just be really weird. But I have an eye for it, so most people aren't going to fucking get it. But Top Gun Maverick did not do that. When they went full landscape, they did full landscape.
Interesting. I just want to say that Cillian Murphy's voice in this movie is captivating. He's not soft-spoken, but he's more reserved personality. Isn't super energetic or anything, but you're still captivated by this guy the entire time because his eyes are so striking. You can see all the gears turning in this guy's head, and his voice is just, ooh, I want to listen to you. Like, let me look in those eyes and listen to you all day long. And I think Oppenheimer was probably like that in real life too, because he was pretty clearly a good leader and director, and that's why they picked him for the job. So I think he's a very captivating personality and actor.
He's very underrated. He's worked with Christopher Nolan before in the past, with Inception and the Dark Knight trilogy, and even in Dunkirk. Like most of Christopher Nolan's stuff he's been in, but he's mostly just a side character. And I was really happy to see him get the main part in a Christopher Nolan movie because, again, I've been a Peaky Blinders fan ever since like the 4th season came out. My parents got me hooked, and he's a phenomenal. You would love him in Peaky Blinders. It's one of those BBC shows where the season's like only 6 episodes long, but they're like an hour, and it's one of those things where it's called like it's kind of like Sherlock in that way. It's like series 1, series 2. It's their way of doing things, but it's very well done. You would love it.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see it eventually. Well, I think that's about all I got to say on this one.
Phenomenal movie. I'm going to make the prediction now without knowing the other films that are coming out this year. This will be the movie that Christopher Nolan finally wins an Oscar. That's just my prediction. I feel like this is his magnum opus. If it's not for directing, if it's not for writing, if it's not for best, it's got to be for best picture. So far, this is I can't think of a movie that's coming out in terms of size besides maybe Dune Part 2, which I doubt because it's a sequel and it didn't win the first time. Yeah. But this is my guess. And I know for a fact Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, and Robert Downey Jr. will be at least nominated.
Right. Okay.
And maybe even Matt Damon. Maybe.
Okay, I thought of a few more things to say, just like a couple critiques. I sometimes I felt like, well, because you said with the writing, and it reminded me that some of the writing in some of the sequences felt like, not like characters talking about stuff, but nearly like I was being lectured to on like in a university class, and they're just kind of spouting exposition about stuff. So like, some of the writing was a little clunky like that. And the other thing was, I don't think we talked about how you talked about a little bit at the beginning how fast-paced the editing was. For me, they kept that up basically the whole time. This is like a breakneck pace of editing, and sometimes that was like, whoa, every scene is going by so fast. There's so many cuts happening here, it's crazy, but also we got a lot to cover, and it's making the movie feel faster. So I get it, but yikes, you're giving me whiplash here.
Yeah.
So fast. But I love this movie. It's maybe my favorite of the year so far. I'm still forming my list, but it's...
Yeah, it's up there. It's 1 out of 2 for me.
What's your other
It's
one?
either this or Spider-Verse for me.
Or Spider-Verse. I think
Yeah.
John
And it's
Wick
2 different
4
tones.
is up there for me, too.
Oh, yes, John Wick 4 as well.
I didn't like Spider-Verse as much as John Wick, I think. Like, it's...
Really?
I think it's just because I don't know. It's just because it was a part 1. I think it didn't wrap up enough on its own merits for me to be like... I just don't like when... I don't like when movies depend heavily on part 2 or a sequel. Like, Spider-Verse 1 is great because it tells its self-contained thing and it just ends. Right. And Spider-Verse 2 is like... I think they left a lot dangling. And I'm like, the themes of the movie didn't really feel like they got hammered home because they depend so much on how it resolves in the next movie. I'm just like, it's like it's good. It just didn't hit me the way I wanted. But
what's your favorite Lord of the Rings movie? I'm kidding. That one wrapped up fine. I'm making a joke. His favorite's Two Towers, but that one wrapped up fine enough, but left a lot for more. No, I hear you.
Yeah.
It's definitely like that part
more.
1.
Yeah.
And you're not saying it's like you love that movie, but it's not
great,
like
it's a great
it's
movie.
not your.
It's like it's definitely like in my top for this year so far. I'm just
but those
I'm
are the
just
top
saying
3 for me as well: John Wick 4, Oppenheimer, and Spider-Man. And who knows? Maybe Barbie. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see.
I've heard some great things, but I've also heard that it's very political.
The worst things I've heard about Barbie are from the same people who hate every movie that's female-led or directed. Some people just don't like the tone of it, and they're like, yeah, it's not for me, which is
I'm going to
fine.
see
But the most strong
just
opinions.
the actors have fun. I'll probably go see it. I just don't know when.
I'm going for Greta Gerwig, Margot Robbie, and Ryan Gosling.
Oh, I always forget Greta Gerwig directed it. This movie can't be bad. She's directing it.
I'm hoping for a fun time, at the very least. But we're not here to talk about Barbie. We're here to talk about Oppenheimer, which I think is a watch ASAP.
Barbenheimer? Don't you know from the internet, if you talk about Oppenheimer, you have to talk about Barbie and vice versa?
I know, we did that twice.
I love the meme. There was something too where it was like The Dark Knight and another movie was released the same day, and it was like those movies walk so Barbenheimer can run. It was something like that. Oh, what was that movie? I don't even know. I have it saved somewhere.
You know, definitely if you haven't seen Oppenheimer yet, watch it in IMAX or AVX or the best possible viewing presentation you can see for it. Nolan didn't have to go this hard on a biopic, but he made it one of the most epic real-life stories I've ever seen about, to him, the most important man who ever lived, and he's nearly convinced me of that as well.
Yep.
Just because of the legacy this guy made in his wake, and this is one of those movies you come out of thinking that it's felt like it's so epic it feels like it has to be fictional. But it happened within the lifetime of people I know, like both my grandmothers were alive during this period of history, contemporary with Oppenheimer.
He made boring politics epic. You know what I mean? Like it's just you can't do that. Like it's not like possible for most people. But yeah.
Yes.
I loved it.
It's ridiculously good.
Yeah. I think he's going to win this year. I put money on that, even though I don't have any. Anyway, you can find me at Ryan Walker Official on YouTube, TikTok, and on Instagram.
You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Thoughtplay Media. Also, check out the Close Up with Ryan and Joe Facebook page for latest updates on the show. If you listen to us in audio, check out our YouTube channel. And if you're on YouTube, find us anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. We hope to see you on the next Close Up with Ryan and Joe, where we discuss why Hollywood is failing in general right now. Till next time.
Take care.